What's up, guys? Happy Sunday. I wanted to talk about the National Terrorism Advisory System Bulletin put out by DHS on Friday because people in the comment section are freaking out, and I think this is being slightly misunderstood, so I want to get into it. I mean, part of the misunderstanding is due to an apparent disinformation piece put out by NBC Nightly News. On Friday night, they put out a full screen on their news as part of their newscast, and that full screen was pretty misleading. Someone took a picture of it, shared it all over social media, and that full screen says potential terror threats. 1, opposition to COVID measures. Number 2, claims of election fraud, belief Trump can be reinstated. Number 3, 9/11 anniversary and religious holidays. And then at the bottom it says National Terrorism Alert ahead of 9/11 20th anniversary. Okay, that makes it look like if you oppose COVID measures, you're a terrorist. That's not what the actual DHS advisory bulletin is saying. Okay, you still have free speech, and if you don't like COVID measures, you are free to say that you don't like them. What DHS is saying is that they are monitoring online forums for threats of violence in regards to this. So if you're saying I'm planning an attack on some location because you don't like the measures at that location, well then DHS is saying that is a terror threat, and they're really watching for that and increasing communication with local law enforcement in regards to things like this. So that's what this bulletin kind of talks about. So I think it got a little bit exaggerated by that misleading NBC Nightly News full screen, and I did watch their newscast, and it was a bit of a misleading story, and I don't know if they did that intentionally or if it was just sloppy in a rush, but they did make it seem like you shouldn't be opposing COVID measures, basically, and I wouldn't be surprised if they did intend to have a misleading full screen to basically encourage people to stop complaining. But the truth is, you are free to complain. Now, parts of this bulletin are interesting. One part here says, such threats are also exacerbated by impacts of the ongoing global pandemic, including grievances over public health safety measures and perceived government restrictions. Perceived government restrictions, because there haven't been any, right? Government's not restricting anything this past year, right? Interesting. Perceived government restrictions. So they're saying that is exacerbating people's desire to be violent. It says, through the remainder of 2021, racially and ethnically motivated violent extremists and anti-government, anti-authority violent extremists will remain a national threat priority for the United States. So they bunched all of those in. Now, obviously, violent extremists are terrible. Authoritarian governments like to say, don't be anti-authority. So that's interesting. These extremists may seek to exploit the emergence of COVID-19 variants by viewing the potential reestablishment of public health restrictions across the United States as a rationale to conduct attacks. So yeah, they are putting a pointed threat out to people who dislike COVID restrictions, saying we're watching you. This is like an intimidation bulletin as far as I can see. Pandemic-related stressors have contributed to increased societal strains and tensions, driving several plots by domestic violent extremists, and they may contribute to more violence this year. So again, they are saying, they're not saying that they're going to come get you if you like the restrictions, but if you are violent at all, they're watching for that, or talking about violence online. And it's interesting, the comment sections online are just really reacting to this DHS bulletin in a way that DHS probably didn't want. I mean, I've seen more threats of violence in the comment sections due to this bulletin than previously. So it's like DHS by taunting people is making them almost more willing to be violent or something. That's what I'm seeing in the comment section. Okay, additionally, leading up to the anniversary of 9/11 attacks, Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula recently released its first English language copy of Inspire magazine in over 4 years, which demonstrates that foreign terrorist organizations continue efforts to inspire US-based individuals susceptible to violent extremist influences. So DHS is definitely watching threats of foreign terror as well and their influence on Americans. They're also watching for the possibility of mass casualty violent extremist attacks. Now that more things have reopened, watching for that in houses of worship and in schools. Okay, now we get down to this interesting line. There are also continued non-specific calls for violence on multiple online platforms associated with domestic violent extremist ideologies or conspiracy theories on perceived election fraud and alleged reinstatement and responses to anticipated restrictions related to the increased COVID cases. So there you go. They're targeting people for two specific topics: election related and COVID regulation related, saying if you're opposed to anything in regards to that, we're watching you closely, and if you threaten violence, we're coming for you. So there it is. I mean, and this line at the bottom is interesting. Nation-state adversaries have increased efforts to sow discord. For example, Russian, Chinese, and Iranian government-linked media outlets have repeatedly amplified conspiracy theories concerning the origins of COVID-19 and effectiveness of vaccines, in some cases amplifying calls for violence targeting persons of Asian descent. I think there's a big debate globally right now about those two topics. So what on earth why are you calling out Russia, China, and Iran-linked media? I think there's a global debate about those topics, and debate is healthy. So this is a very interesting bulletin. What are they going to do? It says at the end, what are they going to do? How are they responding? They are watching closely. They are watching online forums for disinformation. And they are actually, to counter disinformation, DHS is putting out its own propaganda. DHS is also advancing authoritative sources of information to debunk and, when possible, preempt false narratives and intentional disinformation, and providing educational materials to promote resilience to the risks associated with interacting with and spreading disinformation, conspiracy theories, and false narratives. So that is some of what DHS is doing as it now has activated this latest bulletin on terror threats. It is interesting, when I was in journalism school, that last line I read from the bulletin about them putting out their own propaganda, this is something I was warned about in journalism school, as with the rise of the internet and technology, now government agencies can put out their own media much more easily. So the J School just back in 2011 was saying that, okay, this is what's going to be happening. Government agencies are going to be pumping out their own propaganda to help people see it their way. And so it's the job of the journalist to understand, that's the agency's little narrative they're pushing, but what is the truth? So that's what we are looking at. So just wanted to add some clarity to that, because that one full screen graphic being sent everywhere on social media from NBC Nightly News was definitely misleading. I think it's a graphic that encourages people to shut up and stop verbally opposing COVID measures. Truth is, you are allowed to verbally debate still on these topics, and you're not going to be called a terrorist. So I just wanted to make sure people get that. Have a great Sunday.